Hello everybody, my name is Matt Warming, and today we are going to be talking about how to best improve your online teaching methods. I've subtitled this Hook Them Somehow. And the reason why I did that is because, and this is also a little bit about myself, I come from a production background, production and performance. So as we look into improving our teaching techniques, we need to look at the instructional design process. And as I was getting my master's, the ID process followed right in with the production process. So it was really a nice fit for me. It was a lot of really, we need to do that. Well, that's what we do in the production world. So that's kind of how I'm framing this tutorial. We're going to be following some instructional design practices, and then we're going to be looking at actual best practices as we rotate on to our online / alternative delivery methods. So with that, let's get started. Well, let's start this by asking a question. We are living in a blank world. And I went out and I did a little search for social media platforms, and obviously I got the following: TikTok, YouTube, Snapchat, Facebook, and everybody texts nowadays. But as I looked into this, as I actually found out how many social media sites there were over 21 different social media sites that feature over, let's see what the lowest one is here, that feature over 60 million users. So that's a pretty big number. So, we've got your TikToks, your YouTubes. I missed one since I'm not hip enough, WhatsApp. And there's also Facebook Messenger, we've got WeChat, Instagram. Kids are doing that nowadays. And a couple of these on the list, since China has so many billions of people, they had their own social media sites on there as well. But what I found interesting was that Twitter was number 12. But again, this list was from like last year, so that very well could be dated information. And just a lot of ones I've never even heard of. So the way we're communicating nowadays in brief is it short, brief snaps. And translating this into today's society and how people are communicating could affect how you teach, simply because you need to hold their attention longer than what these apps do. As I sit there and watch my kids on their phone, they're going from one app to another, getting a blast of information from TikTok, getting a blast of information from Instagram. So in other words, we are fighting for attention span. And I always used to make the comment is that someday instruction is going to be delivered via text. So you're going to have 10 seconds worth of instruction delivered. I don't know if we're ever going to get to that, but it very well could be. I don't know. If it works for you and you have the time, perhaps that's a way to attack it. Let's look at a little bit of a background as we move into this online alternative mode of distributing educational material. Let's have a reality check. And again, this is my humble opinion. So some of them may hold more true than others. Some perhaps are jaded by my own opinions. First and foremost, online alternative delivery are not new concepts. They've been around for as long as we've been able to deliver instruction via smoke signals. So they're not new concepts. And what's been evolving is what exactly is online learning. Well, is it delivery of audio and video and text? Is it the old fashioned online? What is it? So, in my little deranged mind, I think we need to have a different term. And the term that has been thrown about the most is alternative delivery. And alternative delivery, in my mind, kind of fits everything other than classroom. The other term that I kind of like is mixed mode. So I've seen a lot of faculty do this at my institution where they've essentially flipped the class. So they will deliver their instruction via online alternative delivery, and they will use the class time for actual discussion. And as I stated, this isn't a new concept. Brick and mortars have been battling with other online institutions since the internet became a reality. So our Wisconsin system has been under siege by the Phoenix universities and all other types of online institutions. So as a brick and mortar institution and able to maintain our clientele, those are the sort of things, sort of operations that we are up against. And here's a new one that I was personally involved with that involved the University of Oshkosh. Since Oshkosh had an online presence within their CAP program, and the current serving institution of the Baraboo-Sauk County area did not pick up the slack, in my humble opinion, Oshkosh offered the Spanish operations classes to the local high school. Now, this opens up a number of discussions, none of which are relevant at this time, but it's something to think about as we move forward into this alternative delivery type of mode. And as everyone knows, the last couple months has put a spotlight on online delivery on steroids. It's front and center. So this is a new reality. And in my humble opinion, this is something that has been brewing for a long time. I've mention of my experiences picking up my master's degree in Iowa as I'm traveling the 380 corridor and knowing the population decline. I knew right then and there is going to be a need for some sort of alternative delivery due to population drop to get education into the high schools with lower enrollments. Not every high school is going to have a German teacher. They've got to get that instruction in there somehow. So this has been brewing for a long time. So there's been folks out there on the bleeding line for quite a while, but the current situation has put alternative delivery of education to the spotlight. So what exactly can you do to improve your alternative delivery instructions? Do you meet them at that level? I made the comment about delivering instructions over texting. I think perhaps texting is now considered like email was. It's not considered for the current traditional college age people. I can safely say that because my college age child doesn't really reply to my text as much as, say, my spouse would. So, do you step up your game? Well, that's kind of what we're here to do today, is help you step up your game in your online instructional and alternative delivery methods. Or do you just change your instructional strategy? Well, you can answer that yourself, but the one thing that you will need to do is be very adaptable. So let's first do an instructional design check on your course material. So of course, as we walk through our ID process, this is kind of a modified Briggs and Stratton, FYI. First state what are your goals? What are you going to do? let's have an instructional analysis. Let's look at our learner behaviors. And this is something that also you need to be looking perhaps at learner access, learner resources as well. Let's look at our performance objectives. Again, in our new reality, this might need to have a little bit of a check on how you analyze your performance objectives. Then we create a criterion-based test, and we'll get to that in a bit. Let's look at our instructional strategies. And as we look into these a little bit, it's pretty clear that your strategies need to adapt to what resources you have available to deliver. And that is mainly in this case using the internet and the tools that you have to deliver that instruction, which leads into instructional materials. So your resources being, what you have on your computer and the internet at large. So then, of course, we evaluate and assess, and then we will, of course, revise our instruction. So let's dive right into what are your goals. All of these considerations are interdependent. Each of them affects the other. So what is your result? What does it look like? And what will they do? Here's the things you need to consider. Is there any approval? Probably not. Your media considerations, budget's kind of big nowadays because as I stated, my background is more of a production background, so you need to come up with some resources to build your instruction now, and that perhaps could require some funding. And of course your deadlines, you're dealing with your semesterly here, but in my case, from my production background, creating training materials, creating training videos, you've got certain deadlines that you need to hit, but all the same sort of concept here. We've got deadlines to meet. This is one of my favorite visuals that came about in my corporate days. You can have it good, fast, or cheap. And often what we are doing in the higher education world is we're doing it fast and cheap. And for me, as a production designer, someone as an instructional designer, someone who has a background in developing these things, to me, that to me is we could up our game a little bit, but unfortunately, because of the almighty dollar, that cheap factor plays a really big role. But my role as an instructional designer, that's where the good can come in. And the reason why I love this is because my supervisor wanted all three of these, and as you can see there in the middle, they're dreaming. But my role as an instructional designer is to bring some of that good into the fast and cheap. And as we consider all these items in production planning, I always write a clear statement of purpose. Is that really necessary? With yours, perhaps. That's for you and your discipline to figure out. But I always do that in my production planning. Let's look at our instructional analysis here, some background information. So for example, when I was doing my learning management system training for my faculty, I always had to use LMS language from the prior LMS. I believe we went through 3 iterations of a learning management system. So, and able to communicate, I had to use language that would translate for the new ones by using the old, if you will. So, and of course we look at this and we say, what should the learner know before we introduce this topic? So in my case of introducing a new learning management system, they need to know the basic ins and outs of how a learning management system works. So that much I knew, every one of my faculty knew, but now we're talking about driving a Maserati as compared to driving a Fiat. So a little bit different tactic perhaps on how to do that. So, using a real brief, quick overview. Let's look at our learner behaviors. Um, so here's are some of these items that you need to be looking at, and perhaps this also rolls into a little bit of the resources that the learner has as well. These are not all inclusive. Of course, the communication skills, their attitude, knowledge level, social and culture backgrounds, and all of that. Again, getting back to my LMS trainings, I knew that my faculty were pretty hostile. So I had to deal with that behavior in my learners. Let's look at our performance objectives then as we develop our instruction. This one I like calling SWIBTA, simply because it's students will be able to. So what will our students be able to do when we are done? And again, looking at the alternative delivery methods, this needs to be evaluated very closely. This step is all about the details on what exactly the student will be able to do when done with their instruction. After that, we create a criterion-based test. This reflects what you are hoping to teach the students, and it also acts as a checkpoint for administrators and parents. Could this be a final test? Perhaps, but it helps you build the content outline, which is a good segue into our instructional strategy. I like to give an example here. As we research our content and our content outline, in my financial services days, creating my CD-ROM training and all training, but the CD-ROM was supposed to solve everything by asking the question, how will the instruction take place? Lecture, handouts, what materials will you have in place? So as we are developing our alternative delivery, we are pretty much looking at one delivery tool. So we are at the mercy of the technology. As we look at that, of course, what are materials and activities, and I alluded to that sooner. Here's a good example when we talk about, how will it be done, activities. One of my past roles, was administrating the NODE program, which you are probably aware of in the colleges. And the NODE, represented non-online distant learning. In other words, classes being beamed in via Polycom technology, audio-video transmission. And oftentimes there would be one student in the class. And I would always advise our advisors that if we can't find a second student, that one student would not benefit simply because of the lack of collaboration. So as you're developing your online instruction, alternative distribution, you don't know where your students are, but you can build collaborative environments within your LMS tool, and I would highly recommend that, simply to keep the engagement at a level to keep them interested. So but of course the almighty dollar overruled, and students would also do very well one-on-one there in that particular case. So but I always felt if the distant student had a partner, it would go much better for them working in a collaborative environment. Let's look at our instructional materials. Again, this is more applies to my creative process in a training environment, not necessarily, but you need to look at it, especially now as we look at our delivering, and you're basically doing a 45-minute, 40-minute production every time you instruct. So will it do you good to make a treatment or a storyboard? And this is where we start considering our production process is, our AV materials, our appropriateness, and what are your resources. Now we're talking about copyright and everything, and you're distributing things. So your instructional materials in an online environment, perhaps you storyboard it out. That I think that might perhaps help a little bit. I always admire the teaching profession because that's what they're doing every time they teach. They're giving an hour production of their knowledge. So the more things that you can add to that, the better the instruction. And again, it's my role as a instructional designer. I feel that's my place, is to assist you in that way. Then, of course, as we move along, we evaluate and assess our instruction. Did it work? What are our student behaviors and the student success? I alluded to my faculty LMS trainings, and I measured my success by how many callbacks I've got after the training. I've also, during the training, provide them with those that are quote on the upper level. I give them instructions, and oftentimes they can figure it out themselves. So we of course evaluate and assess, and then of course we go back and revise. So we take what we learned from step 8 and then we revise it. And in this kind of environment, the best way for me to do that is to go door to door during business hours or office hours or right before class. Just, hey, Professor Jones, what do we need to do to help you utilize your LMS a little bit better? Back in the Desire to Learn days, I was able to see their course of the semester, and I could evaluate them. With Canvas, of course, it's a little bit more difficult to see their actual semester training. I could perhaps look at their master course, but the way my faculty have been developing, they go from semester to semester. They go from semester to semester. They do not go master course, new semester, if you follow my training there. So Canvas is a little more difficult to follow up with faculty because I'm more removed from the semester occurrences. I can only look at the master course if they invite me. So those are the only tool sets that I have other than looking over their shoulders. So that'd be one of the things perhaps in this organization, if I'm offered the opportunity to have that kind of tool set where I'm able to look in on the instructor's CPU, so I can look live on what's going on, so I can, in case of physical separation, that would be a great tool in which to have. Okay, so now we've gone through our ID process. Now what do we do? Well, as I stated, we got to hook them, and pretty much as I have suggested in a production environment, you're going to be doing a lot of things over and over again, and it's a lot of time commitment. So multiplicity and time commitment. So, and able to make this transition, I'm not going to be nice about it. It's going to take more time if you want to be successful in this new environment. And that's what we'll move to as we look at some best practices in delivering and recording our alternative delivery. So let's look at some best practices, and these are in no order at all. One of the things that I noticed in my Node experiences managing that program was the engagement. Engage, engage, engage. Simply because of the distance involved. I've had several visitors that stopped by and observed a teaching class in a DE room, and they said, well, this guy is just kind of spewing forth, and it would go on for hours, for a good 15 minutes without any engagement. Your typical lecture, if you will. And it's my feeling that, especially in this environment when there's so much separation, you need to have engagement. And that engagement can be anywhere from stopping and asking personal questions. You can, you have the tool set to put up surveys. You've got to figure out a way to keep everybody engaged. One of the things that you might want to consider before the first day of class, have a plan of failure. What do the students do if something goes wrong? Spell it out. Most of the time, the tool set that you use will record your lecture as you are presenting it. So you will at least have a local copy somewhere for the students to have. And then it's up to you or perhaps your department to decide how long does that lecture stay out there. A week, a day, that's a question for departments. Perhaps there's already a policy out there. I can't answer that at that time, but perhaps there needs to be one. I don't know. Another thing you need to do as early as you can in your teaching of a particular course is to survey your students. And the reason why is very simple, is what do your students have access to? During this last couple months, I know in this area there were several students that were remote enough where they just could not get high end service internet provided to them. The best they had was literally a dial up modem. So delivering audio and video is not an option, or receiving audio and video is just not an option for those students. You need to be aware of those students' needs. Is there a way that they can circumvent that? And that is where you need to be one-on-one with your instructors and very upfront on how you deliver your instruction. Is there things that they can do? Is there some service that the campus can provide? I don't know at this time. I'm sure they're in the works right now. So you need to survey your students for such an emergency. And of course, the other part is the training. You got to train yourself, and you have to train your students how to use these tool sets. My experience has shown that the students are very adaptable. What they are not adaptable to, of course, as I alluded to, is the attention span. To me, I think that is a big part in the learner behavior nowadays that needs to be addressed. So therefore, the title of my presentation is "You Gotta Hook Them." So you gotta train the students and able to do that. And when we look at our content that we're delivering, you do it early if you can. Make it and you deliver it as many different ways as you can, and perhaps your students can be trained one way or another. You have your LMS that we have access to. Students should be at, and students should know this. If not, you stated in your syllabus that you need to be checking this class every day for material. Some instructors are still using email. They're nice. Some aren't. Some make it known that you need to check your LMS every day. Some even, the LMS even has a text function within it, and I would highly advise that you train your students to do that. If nothing else, they're going to get a text saying, hey, there's something new on your LMS, so they've got that access to the material. And the last thing is the Zoom du jour. The reason why I say that is because, remember Skype? Some people do. Zoom came along, and that was the delivery portal for, that, at least in my mind, everybody was going to crash the Zoom servers, but the last couple of months proved that Zoom was built to handle all of that. But of course, there's security issues with that, so perhaps there's going to be another delivery message method that may come along. So the reason why I say that is because I alluded to the recording functions. Any new delivery system's going to have that function, I would hope. So your content being delivered in however method you're doing it. Some faculty use that tool set. Some faculty use their LMS and recorded PowerPoints. There's just numerous ways to get your content out there. And also with Zoom, at least for live functions, they also had the 800 number function. So at the very least, your students that are in remote areas could potentially listen in a remote area via the audio over their phone, and they would have their slides printed out for them. Again, which is why you need to get them out early, because as you know, downloading, well, maybe you don't, it takes a while to download things on a slower speed. So let's continue with some more best practices as we're delivering our audio and our video, recorded or live. Ask yourself, is video needed? And this all depends on your discipline and the lesson of the day. That's LOD. So perhaps you need to have visuals for the lesson of the day. The example I use here is a lot of math classes are taught at the chalkboard, so that obviously requires some sort of video, as opposed to a lecture on varying cultures or an ethics lecture. I'm just speaking off the top of my head here, but perhaps those are things you need to think about. Is video really needed? The other thing that we do make sure is that you use a headset and mic. And I was going to see if I can change that during that, and I cannot change that with my recording tool. Right now I am using a headset. But one of the things that my daughter experienced right away was when the faculty member was lecturing and they were using a webcam, and then something like this would happen where the mic would go up here and you couldn't hear them, and I'm kind of faking it by moving my boom up, so simulating moving my head, and all of a sudden he would come back into play like that. So kind of a doppelganger kind of effect. So use a headset if you can. If you don't, don't turn your head, and make sure you have a secure room to record in. Right now I'm in my office, my door is shut. You might have heard me earlier in the presentation, the wind kind of came up and opened the door, so I had to shut the door. And also prevents my pet from getting in as well. And as you're recording, make a plan for that as well. If you can, anytime you could use wired, use wired. For example, right now I'm not in proximity to a wired port, so I have to upload overnight, simply because the bandwidth is going to eat things up to upload that. So plan ahead when you're uploading, simply to keep your resources at bay. And also use wired, because it's a one-to-one connection and it'll be a lot smoother. So continuing on with our best practices, we're going to talk about receiving your audio and video. Now, we had some discussions in our faculty about FERPA questions, questions about student video. In other words, in my personal opinion, you don't need to see the students. You just got to know that they're there. However, that's a good way to know that they're there, because once they turn off their video and mute, you don't know if they're there. But again, that's an ethics question. If they don't want to learn that day, that's all of them. They're adults and all of that. So that's a question I think I don't have the answer to right at this time, but it's something to think about. However, as I discovered as my daughter was taking her classes, they really enjoyed the pet cam. Class could not start until all the pets were introduced. I don't know if the faculty member put those pets on the roster, but it might improve morale. We can't start class till we do the cat introduction. Slows things down, but it does build engagement. As we talk about our receiving our audio, one of the things that Zoom did have was muting everybody. So that might be something you might want to consider. If not, make sure the students have their mics muted. Not all students are going to have headsets. They're probably going to be using their laptops and the built-in microphones, so you're going to hear everything that's going on. You're going to hear a little brother screaming in the background. You're going to hear dogs barking, you name it. But if you have the ability, and most of the new delivery methods have this, an ability to mute everybody. But however, this leads to a interesting fact that if you want to engage, students are trying to talk, but you can't hear them. Zoom did have a neat feature where it sensed that you were talking and it said, hey, you're trying to talk, but you're muted. So there are tool sets, to work around that. So students need to remember to unmute. So that's another thing. And always remember, you always have the messaging function within the tool set. And that's another thing that you need to make very clear on your day zero, is that that's always a way to communicate with you, during a live session, is that you have the messaging. So make sure that that is in your day zero plans, and perhaps even make that part of your syllabus as you plan for the potential failure. So moving on with some more best practices, let's talk a little tricks here. I use the math example, and I've seen this quite a bit, is where instructors would purchase a clear plexiglass, and their camera that they were using had a inverse function. So as they would write on the board, as they would see it, the camera would flip it so it would present correctly to their students. So this can be done really cheaply. However, you need a little bit better camera for that, perhaps. Your standard webcam may not work. But again, that's trial and error and something you can think about. So clear plexiglass and erasable markers if you are the chalkboard/whiteboard type instructor. Another thing, we talk about audio. I think audio is one of the most critical things. Anybody can shoot a video. However, you listen, and that is where the key information is being distributed, is via the audio. So that's why I was very clear and made a very good point about, make sure that you use a headset or a lavalier. You of course can get a USB wired, and wireless are going to be more expensive, which I find, because every time I get up or drop something, I'm tethered, and so something always gets yanked. And this gets back to your resources part, and something that departments need to start thinking about. Where are these fundings coming from? Because back when I first started this journey of creating content, I was the only one with all these neat tools. Now, and able to deliver your instruction, you need these tools for a better teaching environment, to help you deliver your content. So everybody's got a multimedia machine equipped with a higher end camera and some sort of microphone, and in my humble opinion, you need to have a lavalier or a headset in which to communicate. Some other things to think about, as I was presenting this, I had to get up and shut the door. It's all part of instructions. It makes it more real, if you will, unless you really do a bad flub. By that, which I mean is that you're disciplined upon further review, saying, no, wait a minute, I've got to change the syntax of that to make sure it's correct. Don't worry too much about your errors. Life is life. Move on. The production standard in myself says, it's got to be better. But, the key here, content is king. Yes, you got to be flexible. And that leads to our final point is, adaptability. You're going to have to adapt. No questions about it. And you're going to have to become a little mini producer. And that leads us up to our summary, where we suggest that, in able to be successful, you need to engage your students. And there's tool sets out there within the LMS, within the Zoom du jour, that helps you do that. You're going to need to adapt. You're going to need to do some visuals. You're going to need to be creative. Utilize your instructional designers that the campus has on staff to help you with that. But most importantly, teach your style. Yes, you're going to have to make some adaptations, but you got to be yourself. Otherwise you can't make those connections with the student. So keep all of this in mind to help you become a better online / alternative delivery / mixed mode instructor. If you have any questions, let me know. Thanks. Bye.